The rain hammered against the windows of the shabby apartment as Sophia Chen carefully arranged her art supplies on the small wooden table. Each paintbrush was placed with precision, each tube of paint organized by color. Art was her escape from the chaos that had become her life, the only thing that brought her peace in a world that seemed determined to tear her apart. Her fingers trembled slightly as she mixed colors on her palette. The eviction notice crumpled on the kitchen counter served as a constant reminder of their desperate situation. 3 months behind on rent, utilities cut off last week, and her father nowhere to be found for the past 2 days. The sound of heavy footsteps in the hallway made her heart race. She recognized that uneven gait immediately. Robert Chen was home, and from the way he stumbled against the door, she could tell he had been drinking again. "Sophia, my beautiful daughter," Robert slurred as he pushed through the door, his clothes wrinkled and reeking of cigarettes and cheap alcohol. "Come here, I have wonderful news." Sophia set down her brush, already dreading whatever scheme her father had concocted this time. At 22, she had learned to recognize the dangerous gleam in his eyes that appeared whenever he thought he had found another shortcut to wealth. "Dad, please tell me you haven't been gambling again," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Above the storm outside, Robert laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through their tiny living space. "Gambling, no, my dear. This time, I made an investment. A very smart investment that will solve all our problems." The terrible truth Luna emerged. From their shared bedroom, her school uniform wrinkled from sleeping in it. At 16, Sophia's younger sister had already learned to be suspicious of their father's grand announcements. The three of them stood in the dim light of their one working lamp, a family bound together by necessity rather than love. "What kind of investment?" Sophia asked, though part of her already knew. She didn't want to hear the answer. Robert's smile faltered for just a moment before returning with renewed intensity. "I met some very important people last night. Some very wealthy people who understand the value of family connections." The words sent ice through Sophia's veins. She had heard rumors in their neighborhood about men who made deals involving their daughters, trading flesh and innocence for debt forgiveness. She had always told herself that her father, despite his flaws, would never sink to such depths. "The Blackwood Corporation has agreed to clear all our debts," Robert continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. "The house, the medical bills from your mother's treatment, even the money I owe to some rather unforgiving individuals, all of it gone." "And what do they want in return?" Luna asked, her young voice sharp with suspicion. Robert's eyes shifted to Sophia, and in that moment, she understood. The room seemed to spin around her as the full weight of his betrayal crashed down like a collapsing building. "They want a bride for their heir," Robert said quietly. "A pure, untouched bride who can bear the next generation of the Blackwood dynasty." The price of pure to Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. She had saved herself, believing that someday she would find love with someone who cherished her. Her virginity wasn't just a physical state, but a symbol of hope for a future filled with genuine affection and partnership. "You sold me," she whispered, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "You actually sold your own daughter. I saved us." Robert shouted, his mask of jovial confidence finally slipping. "Do you think I had a choice? Do you know what those men would have done to me if I couldn't pay? To all of us?" Luna moved closer to Sophia, her young face pale with terror. "Sophia, you don't have to do this. We can run away. We can figure something else out." But Sophia knew better. She had seen what happened to families who tried to escape their debts in their neighborhood. The Blackwood name carried weight in the city, and their reach extended far, beyond what most people could imagine. "When?" Sophia asked, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "Tomorrow," Robert replied. "The ceremony is tomorrow evening." The Blackwood Empire's the night wore on. Sophia learned more about the family that had purchased her like a piece of art at an auction. The Blackwoods owned the largest technology conglomerate on the East Coast, with interests ranging from artificial intelligence to real estate development. Their wealth was measured not in millions, but in billions, accumulated over 3 generations of ruthless business practices. Damian Blackwood, the man she was to marry, was 29 years old and had never been married. According to the whispered stories Robert had gathered, he was brilliant, but cold, a man who treated human relationships like business transactions. His previous engagements had all ended mysteriously, with the women simply disappearing from public view. "It's not cruel," Robert insisted, though his words carried no conviction. "The family just values tradition. They want someone untouched by the world, someone who can be molded into the perfect wife for their empire." Sophia felt sick. The idea of being molded like clay into someone else's vision made her skin crawl. She thought of her art, the way she could transform a blank canvas into something beautiful and meaningful. Now she was to become the canvas, and someone else would hold the brush. The last night of freedom as her father passed out on the couch. Sophia and Luna huddled together in their small bedroom. The rain had stopped, but the silence felt even more oppressive than the storm. "I could call the police," Luna whispered. "This has to be illegal." "It's not," Sophia replied, having spent the evening researching contract marriages and debt transfer laws. "Technically, I'm agreeing to the marriage to resolve a family debt. As long as I sign the papers willingly, there's nothing illegal about it." Luna began to cry softly, and Sophia held her sister close. She thought about their mother, who had died 2 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. The medical bills had been the beginning of their financial downfall, but their mother's final words had been about keeping the family together. "Promise me you'll take care of Luna," their mother had whispered from her hospital bed. "Promise me you'll protect her from the world." Now Sophia realized this was how she would keep that promise. By sacrificing herself, she could ensure that Luna would have a chance at a normal life. The Blackwood Agreement included provisions for Luna's education and living expenses till she turned 20-1. The morning of surrender, dawn broke gray and cheerless. Matching Sophia's mood as she prepared for what felt like her execution, she had barely slept, spending most of the night painting one final piece. It was a portrait of herself, as she was now young and hopeful, despite everything. She wanted to remember this version of herself before it was lost forever. Robert had sobered up enough to provide her with more details about the ceremony. It would be held at the Blackwood Mansion, a sprawling estate overlooking the harbor. Only immediate family would be present, along with the lawyers necessary to make the contract binding. "You'll be well taken care of," Robert insisted as he helped her pack her few belongings. "The Blackwoods are not monsters. They simply have very specific expectations." And Sophia said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing with her father was pointless. He had always been a master at justifying his actions, no matter how harmful they were to others. The arrival of the Blackwood Mansion was even more imposing than what Sophia had imagined. Set on 50 acres of manicured grounds, the house itself was a monument to wealth and power. Gothic spires reached toward the sky, while expansive windows looked out over gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. A butler in formal attire met them at the front door, his expression carefully neutral as he escorted them through marble halls lined with priceless artwork. Sophia's artist's eye cataloged each piece automatically, a habit that provided a small distraction from her growing anxiety. They were led to a library that was larger than their entire apartment. Flatuzling bookshelves surrounded a massive fireplace, and the scent of old leather and expensive cologne hung in the air. It was here that Sophia got her first glimpse of the man who would become her husband, the cold stranger Damien. Blackwood stood with his back to them, silhouetted against a window that overlooked the harbor. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that probably cost more than Sophia's family had seen in months. His dark hair was styled with precision, and when he finally turned to face them, his pale blue eyes seemed to look right through her. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice deep and emotionless. "I trust the arrangements are satisfactory." Sophia found herself unable to speak. This was not the monster she had imagined, but something perhaps worse. He was handsome in a classical way, with strong features and an aura of absolute confidence. But his eyes held no warmth, no recognition of her humanity. She was simply a commodity he was acquiring. "Very satisfactory," Robert replied eagerly. "Sophia is everything we discussed. Pure, educated, and ready to fulfill her duties." The way her father spoke about her made Sophia's stomach turn. She wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there like livestock being evaluated for purchase. But the memory of Luna's tears and their mother's final request kept her feet planted firmly on the expensive Persian rug. The actual ceremony was brief and businesslike. A judge appeared to perform the legal requirements, while lawyers from both sides ensured that every detail of the contract was properly documented. Sophia signed her name on document after document, each signature feeling like another chain being wrapped around her soul. The marriage contract was unlike anything she had ever seen. It detailed not just the financial arrangements but also her expected behavior, appearance standards, and even restrictions on her communications with the outside world. She was to be available for public appearances when required, maintain her physical fitness, and submit to regular medical examinations to ensure her continued suitability for bearing children. When it was over, Bart kissed her cheek with tears. In his eyes, "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but this was the only way." Then he was gone, leaving Sophia alone with her new husband in the vast library. The silence stretched between them like an ocean, filled with unspoken expectations and barely contained resentment. "Your belongings will be moved to the East Wing," Damien said finally. "You'll have your own suite of rooms. I expect you to be ready for dinner at 7 sharp. We have guests coming tonight, and you'll need to make a good first impression." That, he walked away, leaving Sophia standing alone among the books and shadows, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia became Mrs. Damien Blackwood, and she had learned that luxury could be its own form of torture. Her suite in the East Wing was larger than her family's entire apartment, complete with a sitting room, bedroom, walk-in closet, and private bathroom that resembled a spa more than a functional space. Yet despite all the marble and silk, she felt more trapped than ever. Each morning began the same way: soft knock on her door at precisely 7 o'clock, followed by the entrance of Mrs. Catherine Wells, her personal attendant. The elderly woman was kind but firm, ensuring that Sophia was properly groomed and dressed according to the day's schedule. Today, like most days, included etiquette lessons with Eleanor Blackwood, Damien's mother. "Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood," Catherine said, setting down a silver tray with breakfast. "Your mother-in-law has requested you wear the blue Chanel dress for today's lesson. She has invited some ladies from her charity board to observe your progress." Sophia's stomach twisted. Being paraded in front of Eleanor's friends like a trained animal had become a weekly humiliation. These women would examine her posture, critique her conversation skills, and discussed her suitability as a Blackwood wife, as if she weren't even in the room. Of course, Sophia replied, her voice carefully neutral. She had learned quickly that expressing any displeasure resulted in longer lessons and harsher criticism. As Catherine helped her into the designer dress, Sophia caught sight of herself in the floor-length mirror. The woman staring back barely resembled the art student who had lived in a cramped apartment just a month ago. Her hair had been professionally styled and colored, her skin perfected with expensive treatments, and her body shaped by personal trainers and nutritionists. She looked like a Blackwood wife but felt like a stranger to herself. The mother-in-laws. Testalon or Blackwood ruled the social sphere of the mansion with an iron fist wrapped in pearls and silk. At 58, she maintained the kind of timeless elegance that only unlimited wealth could provide. Her silver hair was always perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless. Her wardrobe consisted entirely of custom pieces from the world's most exclusive designers. The morning lesson took place in the sunroom, a glass-enclosed space overlooking the mansion's rose garden. 4 women sat around a delicate tea service, their voices hushed, but their eyes sharp as they evaluated Sophia's every movement.
"Dear,"
Eleanor said as Sophia took her designated seat. A Blackwood woman must embody grace under pressure. "Our family's reputation depends on maintaining certain standards." "Yes, Mother Blackwood," Sophia replied, using the formal address she had been taught. The words felt like stones in her mouth. "Mrs. Hartford here was just telling us about the upcoming Children's Hospital Gala," Eleanor continued, gesturing to a thin woman with calculating eyes. "It will be your first major public appearance as Damien's wife. Are you prepared for such an occasion?" The question was loaded with threat. Sophia had been attending preparation sessions for weeks, learning which fork to use for each course, how to make appropriate small talk, and most importantly, how to deflect any questions about her background or the circumstances of her marriage. "I believe so," Sophia answered carefully. "I've been studying the guest list and familiarizing myself with the charity's mission." Mrs. Hartford smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How refreshing to see such dedication. "Tell me, what did you do before your marriage? I don't recall seeing you at any of our usual events." The room fell silent except for the soft clink of teacups against saucers. This was the question Sophia dreaded most, the one that could expose the truth about her humble origins and the transactional nature of her marriage. "I was focused on my education," Sophia replied, using the rehearsed answer Eleanor had drilled into her. "Art history and cultural studies. I preferred private pursuits to social ones." "How academic," another woman murmured. And Sophia caught the subtle mockery in her tone. The unexpected a lie later that afternoon. Sophia escaped to the mansion's library, the one place where she felt she could breathe, surrounded by thousands of books. She could almost forget her circumstances and lose herself in stories of other worlds and other lives. She was sketching in a notebook, trying to capture the way the afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, when she heard footsteps approaching. Expecting to see Catherine or another staff member, she was surprised to find a young man about her age standing in the doorway. "Sorry," he said, his voice warm and apologetic. "I didn't realize anyone was here. I'm James Rivera." Sophia recognized the name immediately. James was the son of Damien's business partner and had grown up on the neighboring estate. More importantly, he was one of the few people in her new world who seemed genuinely kind. "Please, don't leave on my account," Sophia said, closing her notebook. "I was just sketching." James stepped into the room, his casual clothing a refreshing change from the formal attire everyone else wore around the mansion. "You're an artist? That's wonderful. There's so little creativity in our world sometimes." "Was an artist," Sophia corrected quietly. "I don't have much time for it anymore." Something in her tone must have conveyed her sadness because James's expression softened. "I'm sorry. I heard about your marriage, and I know it must be difficult adjusting to all of this." His understanding almost brought tears to her eyes. It had been weeks since anyone had spoken to her with genuine empathy and the kindness, and his voice threatened to break down the walls she had built around her emotions. "I managed," she said, though they both knew it was a lie. James sat down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I knew your husband when we were children. He wasn't always so cold. Something changed after his father died. Family. Business. The pressure. The expectations. It hardened him." "That doesn't excuse how he treats people," Sophia said, then immediately regretted her honesty. Speaking ill of her husband could have serious consequences if word got back to Eleanor. "No, it doesn't," James agreed. "But maybe understanding him might help you find a way to reach him. Sometimes people build walls so high they forget how to tear them down." The business partners schemed that evening. Sophia attended her first formal dinner with Damien's business associates. The dining room could easily seat 30 people, but tonight there were only 8 guests around the massive mahogany table. The conversation revolved around mergers, acquisitions, and market projections. Topics that Sophia found both boring and intimidating. She was seated next to Victoria Ashford, Damien's primary business partner and a woman whose reputation for ruthlessness preceded her everywhere. Victoria was in her early 40s, impeccably dressed, and possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that could cut through any pretense. "So, Sophia," Victoria said during a lull in the business discussion, "how are you finding married life? Damien seems quite attentive to your needs." The comment was delivered with a smile, but Sophia detected an undercurrent of something darker. Victoria's pale green eyes seemed to catalog every detail of Sophia's appearance and demeanor.
"I'm adjusting."
"Well, thank you," Sophia replied, using the safe response Eleanor had taught her. "Of course you are," Victoria continued, "though I imagine it must be quite different from your previous circumstance. Damien showed me the files on your family's situation. Quite desperate, really." The casual cruelty of the comment made Sophia's cheeks burn, but she forced herself to remain composed. Around the table, she could see other guests listening with barely concealed interest. It's hungry for any hint of scandal or drama. Every family faces challenges, Sophia said carefully. I'm grateful for the opportunity to move forward. Laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How diplomatic. I can see why Damien chose you. Beauty, breeding potential, and just enough spirit to be interesting without being troublesome. The words hit Sophia like physical blows. She glanced at Damien, hoping for some sign of support or defense. But he continued eating as if the conversation wasn't happening. His indifference hurt more than Victoria's cruelty. The hidden truth later. That night, after the guests had departed and the mansion had settled into its nighttime quiet, Sophia stood on the balcony of her suite, looking out over the moonlit gardens. The beauty of her surroundings felt like a mockery of her emotional state. A soft knock on her door interrupted her brooding. She expected to see Catherine, but instead found Dr. Michael Torres, the family physician who conducted her weekly medical examinations. "Good evening, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, his Spanish accent lending warmth to his formal tone. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to speak with you privately." Dr. Torres was in his 50s, with kind eyes and gentle hands that had made the humiliating medical examinations slightly more bearable. He had never made her feel like a broodmare being inspected, unlike some of the other staff who clearly saw her as nothing more than a vessel for the next Blackwood heir. "Is something wrong?" Sophia asked, stepping back to allow him into her sitting room. "Not wrong exactly," he said, then hesitated. "Mrs. Blackwood, I want you to know that doctor-patient confidentiality extends to all aspects of your care. Anything you tell me remains between us, regardless of what the family might prefer." His words carried an implication that made Sophia's heart race. "I don't understand." Dr. Torres looked around the room, as if checking for listening devices, then spoke in a lower voice. "Been the Blackwood family physician for 15 years. I've seen how this family treats the women who marry into it. Your predecessor, Damien's first wife, she didn't simply leave, as the family claims." The revelation hit Sophia like ice water. "First wife? But I was told he had never been married." "Officially, that's true. The marriage was annulled, the record sealed. But Caroline existed, and what happened to her should serve as a warning. This family will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their image and ensure their bloodline continues." Sophia sank into a chair, her mind reeling. What happened to her? She tried to leave. When the family discovered she was pregnant, they ensured she couldn't go anywhere. The stress, the isolation, the constant pressure. She lost the baby and suffered what the family called a nervous breakdown. Last I heard, she was in a private facility somewhere in Switzerland. The room seemed to spin around Sophia. She thought of all the times Eleanor had stressed the importance of producing an heir. All the medical tests and treatments designed to optimize her fertility. She was nothing more than a breeding animal to these people. "I'm telling you this because I believe you're in danger," Dr. Torres continued. "Not physical danger necessarily, but psychological. The family has ways of breaking people who don't comply with their wishes. And I've seen signs that they're becoming impatient with the lack of progress in your marriage." The surveillance that night, Sophia lay awake staring at the ornate ceiling of her bedroom. Dr. Torres's warnings echoing in her mind. For the first time since her marriage, she began to truly examine her surroundings with suspicious eyes. She had always felt watched in the mansion, but she had attributed it to the hovering presence of staff and Eleanor's constant surveillance. Now she wondered if there were more deliberate forms of observation. She thought about the cameras she had noticed in common areas, supposedly for security, and began to wonder if they extended to private spaces as well. Rising quietly from her bed, she began a careful examination of her rooms. It didn't take long to find what she was looking for. Tiny lenses disguised as decorative elements, microphones hidden in flower arrangements, monitoring devices that recorded everything from her heart rate to her sleep patterns. The discovery filled her with a cold rage that surprised her with its intensity. Every moment of privacy had been an illusion. Every conversation, every tear, every moment of vulnerability had been cataloged and analyzed. She was not just a prisoner in a golden cage. She was a laboratory specimen under constant observation. But the revelation also sparked something else: determination. If they thought they could break her spirit through surveillance and isolation, they had underestimated her. She had survived her father's gambling addiction, her mother's death, and years of poverty. She would find a way to survive this too. The secret alliance the next morning. Sophia requested a private meeting with James Rivera. Using the excuse of needing help planning a surprise for Damien's upcoming birthday, she arranged to meet him. In the estate's greenhouse, one of the few places she hoped might be free from surveillance. "I need help," she said without preamble. Once they were alone among the exotic orchids and climbing vines, "and I think you might be the only person who can provide it." James studied her face carefully. "What kind of help?" "I need to contact someone outside this family. My sister Luna. I need to know she's safe, and I need her to know that I'm thinking of her." It was a carefully edited version of the truth. What she really needed was to establish a line of communication with the outside world, to begin planning for a future that didn't involve living under the Blackwood family's control. "That's dangerous," James said quietly. "If they found out I was helping you contact your family, I know," Sophia replied. "But I also know you're a good person. You said yourself that this life, this world we live in, lacks creativity and humanity. Help me hold on to mine." James was quiet for a long moment, and Sophia could see him weighing the risks against his conscience. He nodded. "I can arrange something. We have to be very careful. But the family has people watching everything." "I understand. There's something else," James said, his voice dropping even lower. "There are others who have concerns about how the Blackwood family operates. Thinks people who might be willing to help if things becco-mesperate." The implication hung in the air between them. James was suggesting the existence of some kind of resistance. People who oppose the family's methods and might be willing to act against them. "Who?" Sophia asked. "What? Better you don't know details yet, but keep it in mind. You're not as alone as they want you to believe." The public debut at the Children's Hospital Gala arrived like an approaching storm. Sophia had been prepared for weeks, drilled on names and faces, schooled in appropriate responses to questions, and fitted for a gown that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The event was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, with over 300 guests in attendance. As Sophia and Damien made their entrance, she felt the weight of dozens of eyes evaluating her every movement. Camera flashes exploded around. Them as society photographers captured the first public appearance of the mysterious new Mrs. Blackwood. Damien played his part perfectly, appearing to be the devoted husband. His hand rested on the small of her back as they moved through the crowd. "Oh," and he introduced her to important guests with what seemed like genuine pride. But Sophia could feel the performance in every gesture, the calculation behind every smile. "You're doing well," he murmured during a brief moment when they were alone at their table. "Mother will be pleased." "I'm so glad," Sophia replied, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. Damien's eyes sharpened slightly, but before he could respond, they were interrupted by a photographer requesting a formal portrait. As they posed together, Sophia wondered if anyone looking at the photographs would be able to see the truth behind their practiced smiles. The revelation the evening was proceeding smoothly until Victoria Ashford approached their table during dinner. Proceed unusually animated. "Damien, darling," she said, "I have the most wonderful news. The preliminary tests have come back positive. Congratulations. You're going to be a father." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. She hadn't even realized she was pregnant, but apparently the family's medical monitoring had detected it before she had any symptoms. Around the table, she could see the satisfaction on the faces of Damien's associates, as if her pregnancy were a business success rather than the creation of a new life. "Excellent," Damien replied, his tone as emotionless as if Victoria had announced a successful stock purchase. "How far along?" "About 6 weeks," Victoria replied. "Dr. Torres will want to begin specialized care immediately, of course. We can't take any risks with the heir." Sophia felt the walls of her golden prison closing in around her. Now that she was carrying the Blackwood heir, her value to the family had increased exponentially, but so had their control over her. She thought of Caroline, the first wife who had tried to leave and ended up in a Swiss facility, and felt a chill of pure terror. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. This child would be hers too, not just theirs. And maybe, just maybe, Becoming a mother would give her the strength and motivation she needed to find a way out of this nightmare. As the evening continued around her, Sophia made a silent promise to the life growing inside her. She would find a way to give her child the freedom she had lost. Whatever it took, she would break the chains that bound them both. 6 months had passed since the gala, and Sophia's pregnancy had transformed her from a captive wife into a carefully guarded treasure. Her every movement was monitored, her diet controlled by nutritionists, and her activities limited to what the family deemed safe for the developing heir. But pregnancy had also given her something. It's unexpected, a sense of purpose that burned brighter than her fear. The baby moved constantly now, as if sharing her restlessness. Sophia would sit in her room, hands resting on her rounded belly, whispering promises about the world beyond the mansion walls. Dr. Torres had informed her she was carrying a daughter, though the family didn't know she was aware of the baby's gender. She had already chosen a name: Hope. James Rivera had proven to be a true ally, carefully facilitating secret communications with Luna and slowly introducing Sophia to others who questioned the Blackwood family's methods. Through encrypted messages and carefully arranged meetings, she had learned about Detective Amanda Cross, a police investigator who had been building a case against the family's illegal activities for years. We know about the forced marriages, the surveillance, the intimidation tactics. Detective Cross had explained during a clandestine meeting in the mansion's wine cellar. One of the few places James had confirmed was free from monitoring devices. But we need evidence. Hard proof that can stand up in court. Detective Cross was a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had dedicated her career to protecting vulnerable women from exactly the kind of situation Sophia found herself in. "What kind of evidence?" Sophia had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Financial records showing the debt for marriage. Transactions. Documentation of the surveillance equipment. Testimony from other victims. Most importantly, proof that you and others were coerced into these arrangements." The conversation had taken place 3 weeks ago, and since then, Sophia had been carefully gathering information. She photographed documents when she could, memorized financial details she overheard in business meetings. Well, most importantly, she began documenting everything in a secret journal hidden behind a loose stone in her fireplace. The rival's Gambitha. Morning brought unexpected chaos to the usually ordered world of the Blackwood mansion. Sophia was in the garden, taking her prescribed walk for prenatal health, when she heard raised voices coming from Damien's study. Eleanor's sharp tones mixed with Damien's deeper voice and that of a man she didn't recognize. Curiosity overrode caution, and she moved closer to the open window, positioning herself behind a large hedge where she could hear but remain unseen. "Nicholas Vale has been buying up our subsidiary companies," the unknown man was saying. "He's positioning himself for a hostile takeover, and our sources suggest he has inside information about our private arrangements." Sophia's heart raced. Nicholas Vale was a name she had heard whispered in fearful tones throughout the mansion. He was Damien's primary business rival, a man whose wealth rivaled the Blackwoods, but whose methods were reportedly even more ruthless. "Impossible," Eleanor's voice cut through the morning air. "Our private affairs are completely secure." "Not anymore," Damien replied, his tone grim. "Someone has been feeding him information. He knows about the marriage contracts, the surveillance, possibly even about Caroline." The mention of Damien's first wife made Sophia's blood run cold. She pressed closer to the hedge, desperate to hear more. "If Vale gains control of our companies, he'll have access to everything," the unknown man continued. "All our private records, all our special arrangements. It could destroy not just our business, but our entire way of life." "Then we need to accelerate our timeline," Eleanor said decisively. "The baby is due in 3 months. Once she's born, and the inheritance is secured, we can deal with any external threats more directly." Sophia didn't like the implications of that statement. She had learned enough about the family's methods to know that dealing with threats often involved making problems permanently disappear. The alliance forms that afternoon. Sophia managed to get word to James about what she had overheard. They met in the greenhouse again, surrounded by the lush greenery that provided both camouflage and a sense of life in the sterile world of the mansion. Nicholas Vale could be the key to everything, James said, after hearing her account. If he's planning a takeover, he might be willing to work with law enforcement to expose the family's illegal activities. But can we trust him? Sophia asked. From what I've heard, he's no better than the Blackwoods. Maybe not, James admitted. But sometimes you have to choose between evils. And right now, he's the only one with the resources and motivation to take on this family. They were interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Grace Williams stepped out from behind a large fern, moving with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to remaining unseen. She was younger than Sophia, had expected perhaps 30, with auburn hair and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Grace leads an underground network that helps women escape from situations like yours, James explained quickly.
House.
She's been working with Detective Cross. Grace nodded to Sophia, her expression serious but not unkind. I've been monitoring your situation for months. We know about the pregnancy, and we know the family will become even more controlling once the baby is born. If you want to get out, it has to be soon. I can't leave without my daughter, Sophia said immediately. Plan you have. She has to be part of it. That makes things more complicated, Grace admitted. But not impossible. We've helped other pregnant women escape similar situations. The key is having a destination they can't reach and legal protection they can't override. What did you have in mind? James asked. Grace pulled out a small tablet, showing them a map, marked with various locations. We have safe houses in 3 different countries, all in jurisdictions where the Blackwood family has limited influence. We also have lawyers specializing in international custody cases and human trafficking laws. The word trafficking made Sophia flinch, but she realized it was an accurate description of her situation. She had been bought and sold like property, forced into marriage, and was now being held against her will for the purpose of producing an heir. There's something else, Grace continued. We've been in contact with Nicholas Vale's people. He's willing to provide financial backing for the legal proceedings and safe housing in exchange for testimony about the family's illegal activities. So we'd be trading one controlling man for another? Sophia asked skeptically. Not exactly, Grace replied. Vale wants to destroy the Blackwood Empire, but he has no interest in controlling you personally. Most motivation is purely business. Revenge. Once you've provided the testimony he needs, you'd be free to disappear completely. The secret meeting 2 weeks later, a carefully orchestrated plan brought Sophia face to face with Nicholas Vale himself. The meeting took place in the back room of a small restaurant in the city, far from the usual haunts of the wealthy elite. James had arranged for Sophia to have a medical appointment. It would explain her absence from the mansion for several hours. Nicholas Vale was not what Sophia had expected. Unlike Damien's cold perfection, Vale had a rumpled, lived-in quality that made him seem more human despite his intimidating reputation. He was perhaps 45, with graying temples and eyes that held a mix of intelligence and barely controlled anger. Mrs. Blackwood, he said as she entered the private dining room, rising from his chair with old-fashioned courtesy. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Grace and Detective Cross were already present, along with a woman introduced as Carmen Rodriguez, an international human rights lawyer. The setup felt both professional and surreal, like a scene from a movie rather than her actual life. I understand you want to bring down my husband's family, Sophia said without preamble, settling her pregnant form carefully into a chair. What exactly do you need from me? Vale smiled, and for the first time Sophia saw genuine warmth in his expression, direct. I like that. Yes, I want to destroy the Blackwood Empire, but not for the reasons you might think. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. This is my daughter Isabella. 3 years ago, she was approached by Eleanor Blackwood about a business arrangement between our families. Isabella was naive enough to believe it was a legitimate courtship. Sophia felt her heart sink. What happened to her? Violated, and when she threatened to expose what had happened, she was committed to a private psychiatric facility. The official story was that she had suffered a breakdown due to drug addiction. She died in that facility 6 months later, supposedly from complications related to her mental illness. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of traffic outside. Sophia thought of Caroline, the first wife, and realized there might be many more women whose stories had been buried by the Blackwood family's wealth and influence. "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered, and meant it. "The Blackwoods think money and influence make them untouchable," Vale continued, his voice hardening. "I intend to prove them wrong. But I need evidence of their systematic abuse, their illegal activities, their complete disregard for human rights." Detective Cross leaned forward. "Your testimony about the forced marriage, the surveillance, the threats, would be crucial. But we also need physical evidence, documents, recordings, financial records." "I've been gathering what I can," Sophia said. "But my access is limited, and it's getting more restricted as the pregnancy progresses." Carmen Rodriguez spoke for the first time, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested Spanish was her first language. "We can provide legal protection for you and your daughter from the moment you leave the mansion. International custody laws will be on our side, especially given the circumstances of the marriage and pregnancy." "And if something goes wrong?" Sophia asked. "If they catch me before I can get away?" Vale's expression darkened. "Then we move to more direct methods. I have resources the Blackwood family doesn't know about, and I'm prepared to use them." Implication was clear, and while it should have frightened her, Sophia found it oddly comforting. For the first time since her marriage, she was surrounded by people who were willing to fight for her rather than against her. The final heist, the plan they developed, was audacious in its simplicity. During the family's annual board meeting, when all the key players would be occupied for hours, Sophia would access Damien's private study to photograph crucial documents. Grace's team would create a diversion to draw security away from the mansion's east wing, while James would monitor the family's movements to ensure Sophia had enough time to complete her mission. The morning of the heist, Sophia woke with a mixture of terror and excitement coursing through her veins. Her daughter seemed to sense her mother's tension, moving restlessly in her womb, as if eager to be part of the adventure. "Today, little hope," Sophia whispered, her hands resting on her belly. "Today we start fighting for our freedom." The board meeting began at 10 o'clock sharp, with all the key family members and business partners gathered in the mansion's formal conference room. Sophia made her usual morning appearance at breakfast, playing the role of the docile pregnant wife, while internally counting down the minutes until she could put their plan into action. At 11:30, Grace's diversion began. A medical emergency in the staff quarters required the attention of most of the mansion's security team, drawing them away from their usual posts. James, monitoring from his position near the conference room, sent Sophia the all-clear signal. Moving. As quickly as her pregnant form allowed, Sophia made her way to Damien's study. James had provided her with the combination to the safe hidden behind a portrait of the mansion's founder, and her hands shook only slightly as she entered the numbers. Inside the safe, she found exactly what Detective Cross had hoped for: contracts detailing dozens of arranged marriages, financial records showing payments to silence victims, and most damning of all, medical records from the private facility where Carolyn had been held. Working quickly, Sophia photographed everything with a small camera Grace had provided. Each click of the shutter felt like a small victory, a step closer to freedom for herself and justice. For all the other women who had suffered at the hands of this family, she was nearly finished. When she heard footsteps in the hallway outside, panic surged through her as she realized someone was approaching the study. There was no way to escape without being seen. And if she was caught with the evidence, the door opened just as she managed to close the safe, and Sophia found herself face to face with Eleanor Blackwood. Her mother-in-law's sharp eyes immediately took in Sophia's position near the safe and her flushed, guilty expression. Closing the door behind her. "It seems we have a little mouse who's been exploring where she doesn't belong." The confrontation laner moved into the room with predatory grace, her perfectly composed exterior masking what Sophia now realized was a capacity for genuine cruelty. The older woman's eyes were cold as winter, and her smile held no warmth "Oh, I suspected you weren't quite as compliant as you pretended to be," Eleanor continued, settling herself in Damien's leather chair as if she were holding court. "The question is, what exactly have you been looking for in my son's private affairs?" Sophia forced herself to remain calm, thinking of her daughter and the life she wanted to give her. "I was looking for something to read," she said, gesturing toward the bookshelves. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." Breaking crystal. Oh, my dear child. Do you really think I'm that foolish? You were nowhere near the books, and you have that peculiar flush that comes from adrenaline and guilt. Moving with surprising speed for a woman her age, Eleanor crossed to a panel hidden in the wall and pressed something that caused a section to slide away, revealing a bank of monitors. On the screens, Sophia could see footage from hidden cameras. Throughout the mansion, including several views of the study from different angles, "We've been watching you much more closely than you realized," Eleanor said, studying the monitors with satisfaction. "Every meeting with young Mr. Rivera, every whispered conversation, every moment you thought you were alone. Did you really believe we would give you unsupervised access to anything important?" Sophia's heart sank as she realized the extent of the surveillance. If they had been watching everything, then James was in danger. Grace's network was compromised, and her escape plan was in ruins. "But here's what's truly interesting," Eleanor continued, turning back to face Sophia. "We know about Detective Cross, about your underground friends, and about Nicholas Vale's rather dramatic plans for revenge. What we didn't know was exactly how you planned to betray us." The older woman moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow seemed more threatening than shouting. "Now that you're carrying the air, you've become far too valuable to simply dispose of. But that doesn't mean we can't make your life extremely unpleasant if you continue to cause problems." Sophia thought of Caroline, of Isabella Vale, of all the women who had been broken by this family's need for control. But she also thought of her daughter, still safe inside her womb, still dependent on her mother's courage. "What do you want?" Sophia asked quietly. "Complete cooperation," Eleanor replied. "You will inform your little resistance friends that you've changed your mind. You'll provide us with their names and locations. And you will spend the remainder of your pregnancy in complete isolation, with medical supervision that ensures both your health and your compliance. And if I refuse," Eleanor's smile turned genuinely frightening, "then we'll be forced to take more direct action against your sister. Luna is such a pretty girl, and she'll be 18 soon. I'm sure we could find a suitable arrangement for her." As well, the threat against Luna hit Sophia like a physical blow. She had endured everything the family had done to her, but the thought of her sister suffering the same fate was unbearable. "I need time to think," Sophia said, though her mind was already racing with desperate plans. "Oh, of course," Eleanor replied, graciously. "But not too much time. You wouldn't want your friends to do something foolish while you're making your decision." The Escapellinor's threats had given Sophia exactly the motivation she needed. She had 12 hours before she was expected to provide the names of her allies. 12 hours to execute an escape plan that had suddenly become a matter of life and death for everyone she cared about. That night, she used the emergency communication system Grace had taught her, sending coded messages through a chain of contacts that would eventually reach Detective Cross and Nicholas Vale. The message was simple: compromised. Need immediate extraction. They know everything. At 3 in the morning, when the mansion was at its quietest, Sophia made her move. She had packed only the essentials in a small bag hidden under her maternity clothes, including the photograph she had taken from the safe and her mother's pearl necklace. Everything else could be replaced. These items were irreplaceable links to her past and future. James was waiting in the garden, his face pale with worry in the moonlight. "Are you sure about this?" he whispered as they made their way toward the estate's outer wall. "Once we leave, there's no going back." "There was never any going back," Sophia replied, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "They would have kept me prisoner until I died, just like Caroline." Grace's team had disabled the security cameras along their planned route, creating a narrow window of opportunity. Sophia moved as quickly as her pregnant form allowed, following James through the shadows toward a section of the estate's perimeter, where a car waited on the other side of the wall. The climb over the wall was the most terrifying part of the escape. At 8 months pregnant, Sophia's balance was precarious, The fear of falling and harming her baby made every movement feel dangerous. But James was there to steady her, and Grace's people had positioned soft landing materials on the other side. As they drove away from the Blackwood estate, Sophia looked back one last time at the mansion that had been her prison. The windows glowed with warm light, making it look like something from a fairy tale rather than the nightmare it had been. She wondered how long it would take for them to discover her absence, and what Eleanor's reaction would be when she realized her prized possession had escaped. The safe house was located in a small coastal town 3 hours from the city, far enough from the Blackwood influence to provide temporary safety but close enough to maintain communication. With Detective Cross and the legal team, it was a modest cottage overlooking the ocean, with whitewashed walls and blue shutters that reminded Sophia of paintings she had seen in art books. Grace was waiting for them when they arrived, along with Dr. Rosa Martinez, an obstetrician who specialized in caring for women in dangerous situations. The doctor immediately examined Sophia to ensure that the stress of the escape hadn't harmed the baby. "Everything looks normal," Dr. Martinez announced after the examination. "Your daughter is strong and healthy, with a heartbeat that suggests she's as determined as her mother." The words brought tears to Sophia's eyes. After months of being treated like a vessel for the Blackwood heir, it was overwhelming to be seen as a person whose well-being mattered independent of her pregnancy. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, sitting by the cottage's large window and watching the waves crash against the rocks below. "Now we wait," Grace replied, settling into a chair across from her. "Detective Cross is coordinating with international authorities to ensure your legal protection. Nicholas Vale's lawyers are preparing the case that will destroy the Blackwood Empire. And we're making arrangements for you and your daughter to disappear completely once this is all over." "What about Luna and James? They're all in danger because they helped me." "James left the country this morning," Grace assured her, "with family in Ireland, where the Blackwoods can't reach him. As for your sister, she's being moved to protective custody as we speak." The relief was overwhelming, but Sophia knew their safety was temporary. The Blackwood family had resources and connections that stretched around the world. They wouldn't give up easily, especially not when their heir was involved. The hunt begins. The family discovered Sophia's absence at dawn, when Catherine arrived for her usual morning routine and found the suite empty. Within hours, private investigators were scouring the city. Airports were being monitored. The Blackwood legal team was preparing to invoke kidnapping charges against anyone who might have helped her. Eleanor's rage was legendary among the staff. She had smashed priceless antiques, screamed at security personnel, and made threats that had several employees requesting transfers to other positions. Damien, by contrast, had retreated into icy silence, methodically coordinating the search efforts with the focused intensity that made him so successful in business. "Find her," he told the head of their security team. "I don't care what it costs, or what methods you have to use. Find my wife and bring her back." The private investigators began with Sophia's known associates, questioning neighbors from her old apartment building and former co-workers from the charity where she had volunteered. They offered substantial rewards for information and made barely veiled threats against anyone who might be hiding her. But Grace's network had anticipated this response. False trails were laid across multiple states. Fake sightings were reported to draw attention away from the real safe house, and legal barriers were erected to slow down the family's more aggressive tactics. The real breakthrough came when Detective Cross executed search warrants on multiple Blackwood properties simultaneously. The evidence Sophia had photographed, combined with testimony from other victims who had been encouraged to come forward, provided the legal foundation for a full investigation into the family's activities. "We have enough to bring charges," Detective Cross reported during a secure video call with the safe house. "Human trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, kidnapping, and at least 3 counts of manslaughter related to women who died in their care." The media stormed. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, and within hours it had become international news. At the headline, "Billionaire Family Accused of Human Trafficking," appeared on front pages around the world, accompanied by photographs of the Blackwood mansion and business empire. Sophia watched the coverage from the safety of the cottage, feeling a mixture of vindication and terror. Seeing Eleanor's perfectly composed face on television as she denied all charges was surreal. Like watching a movie about someone else's life, the media had latched onto the story with the fervor reserved for scandals involving the ultra-wealthy. Investigative journalists were digging into the family's history, covering evidence of similar arrangements going back decades. Former employees were coming forward with stories of suspicious deaths, forced medical procedures, and women who had simply vanished from public view. Public opinion is on your side, Carmen Rodriguez, the international lawyer, reported during one of their regular check-ins. The Blackwood family's reputation is in ruins. Their stock prices are collapsing. Several governments are launching their own investigations into their business practices. But the media attention also made Sophia a target. Somehow tracked down the location of the safe house, forcing another hasty relocation to a more secure facility. Death threats were arriving daily. Some from Blackwood supporters who blamed Sophia for destroying a respectable family. Others from extremists who saw her story as confirmation of their various conspiracy theories. The testimony 3 weeks after her escape, Sophia found herself in a federal courthouse, preparing to give the testimony that would either destroy the Blackwood empire or result in her own destruction. Her daughter was due any day now, and the stress of the legal proceedings had triggered early contractions that required constant medical monitoring. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters, media crews, and heavily armed security personnel. Sophia entered through a back entrance, her pregnant form hidden under a large coat and surrounded by federal marshals. The weight of the moment was overwhelming. But she thought of all the women who had suffered before her and found the strength to continue. The prosecution had built their case methodically, presenting evidence of the family's systematic abuse, spanning decades. Financial records showed payments to silence victims. Medical documents revealed forced procedures and psychological manipulation. And recorded conversations exposed the family's callous attitude toward the women they controlled. When Sophia took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Her voice was steady as she recounted the details of her forced marriage, the surveillance, the threats, and the discovery of Caroline's fate. She spoke about the dehumanizing medical examinations, the constant monitoring, and the psychological pressure designed to break her spirit. "They didn't see me as a person," she testified, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "I was property to be acquired, a vessel to carry their heir, and when I threatened to expose them, they were prepared to destroy anyone I cared about to maintain their control." During cross-examination, the Blackwood defense team tried to portray her as a gold digger who had willingly entered into the arrangement and was now seeking revenge. But Sophia's composure never wavered, and the evidence spoke for itself. "Did you receive any compensation for entering into this marriage?" the defense attorney asked. "My family's debts were paid," Sophia replied. "But I never saw a penny of money, never had access to accounts, and was never given any choice in how that arrangement was structured. I was sold to pay my father's gambling debts, and I've been a prisoner ever since." The birth Sophia's daughter decided to make her entrance into the world during the lunch recess on the 3rd day of testimony. The contractions that had been building all morning suddenly intensified, and Sophia found herself being rushed to the hospital under heavy security. Dr. Martinez had prepared for this possibility, ensuring that the hospital room was secure and that no unauthorized personnel would have access to mother or child. Even so, the birth felt surreal, surrounded by federal agents and knowing that outside the hospital walls, the media was broadcasting every development to the world. Hope Chen arrived at 3:47 p.m., weighing 6 pounds and 2 ounces with her mother's. Dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with curious intelligence. The moment Sophia held her daughter for the first time, everything else faded away. The legal battles, the media circus, the powerful family that wanted to control them, both none of it mattered compared to the perfect little life in her arms. "Hello, my brave girl," Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We made it. We're free." But their freedom was still fragile. Even as Sophia recovered from the birth, Blackwood lawyers were filing motions claiming custody rights based on Damien's paternity. They argued that regardless of the criminal charges, he was still the legal father and had rights to his child. Carmen Rodriguez was prepared for this challenge. International law is clear on this point, she explained to Sophia while Hope slept peacefully in her bassinet. A child born as a result of human trafficking cannot be subject to custody claims by the traffickers. Your daughter is legally under the protection of federal authorities, and any custody decisions will be made based on her best interests, not parental rights. The trial lasted 6 weeks, with dozens of witnesses testifying to the Blackwood family's systematic abuse of vulnerable women. Former employees revealed the extent of the surveillance systems, doctors testified about forced medical procedures, and other victims found the courage to share their own stories of captivity and abuse. Nicholas Vale's testimony was particularly damning. He provided evidence of the family's involvement in his daughter's death, including recorded conversations where Eleanor Blackwood discussed handling the Vale problem permanently. The revelation that they had not only caused Isabella's breakdown, but had actively contributed to her death shifted public opinion even further against the family. When the verdict was finally read, Sophia was in the safe house, nursing her daughter and watching the proceedings on a secure video feed. The jury found Eleanor Blackwood guilty on all charges, sentencing her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Damien received 25 years for his role in the conspiracy, while other family members and business associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The financial penalties were equally devastating. The family's assets were frozen pending restitution to victims. Their business empire was dismantled, and the Blackwood name became synonymous with abuse of power rather than wealth and success. "It's over," Grace told Sophia as they watched the news coverage together. "They can't hurt you anymore." But Sophia knew it wasn't entirely over. There would always be appeals, attempts by remaining family loyalists to seek revenge, and the challenge of building a new life while protecting her daughter from the legacy of her birth. Still, for the first time in over a year, Sophia felt something she had almost forgotten: hope for the future. The new beginning. 6 months later, Sophia stood on the deck of a small house overlooking a different ocean, watching Hope take her first tentative steps across the wooden planks. They had new names now, new identities provided by the Federal Witness Protection Program, and a small trust fund established from the restitution payments that would ensure their financial security. Luna had joined them after finishing her senior year of high school, and the sisters had slowly begun to heal from the trauma of their family's destruction. Their father had died in prison while awaiting trial for his role in the trafficking conspiracy, a death that brought more relief than grief. James visited occasionally, having established a new life in Ireland, but maintaining his friendship with the women whose courage had exposed the truth. Detective Cross had been promoted and now headed a task force dedicated to investigating similar cases of abuse among the wealthy elite. Dr. Martinez had become not just Hope's pediatrician, but a trusted friend who understood the unique challenges of raising a child born from such circumstances. She helped Sophia work through the guilt and trauma while celebrating each milestone in Hope's development. "She'll never know this world we escaped from," Sophia said to Luna as they watched Hope explore her new environment with fearless curiosity. "She'll grow up free." The legal battles were finally concluded, with the Blackwood family's remaining assets distributed among their many victims. Sophia had donated her portion to organizations that helped other women escape similar situations, keeping only enough to ensure Hope's education and their modest lifestyle. Nicholas Vale had kept his promise, providing protection and resources during the transition, but never seeking to control or manipulate their new lives. His revenge against the Blackwoods was complete. He seemed content to return to his own healing process. The legacy 5 years after her escape, Sophia had become an advocate for other victims of human trafficking, working with law enforcement agencies to identify and prosecute similar cases. Her story had inspired legislative changes that made it harder for wealthy families to hide their crimes behind walls of privilege and influence. Hope was now a bright, energetic 6-year-old who loved art as much as her mother did. Sophia had returned to painting, creating works that expressed both the darkness of her captivity and the light of her freedom. Her paintings were displayed in galleries that supported survivors of abuse, with proceeds funding safe houses and legal assistance for other victims. The cottage by the sea had become a sanctuary, a place where other women in transition could find safety and support while building new lives. Luna had become a social worker, specializing in family reunification, while James had started a foundation that provided educational opportunities for children of trafficking victims. "Do you ever regret it?" Luna asked one evening as they sat on the deck watching the sunset. "Ellis, do you ever wonder what might have happened if you had just ... accepted it?" Sophia looked at Hope, who was building an elaborate sandcastle with the focused intensity she brought to everything. Her daughter was everything the Blackwoods had wanted: intelligent, beautiful, strong, but she belonged to herself rather than to any family dynasty. "Never," Sophia replied firmly. "Every choice we made, every risk we took, every moment of fear and uncertainty was worth it to give her this freedom." The waves crashed against the shore in their eternal rhythm, and Sophia thought about all the women who were still trapped in gilded cages around the world. Her story had ended in freedom, but for others, the nightmare continued. That knowledge gave her the strength to continue fighting, to ensure that hope would grow up in a world where no woman could be bought and sold like property. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia made the same promise she had made in the hospital the day Hope was born. They were free, they were safe, and they would use that freedom to help others break their own chains. The billionaire's captive bride had become something far more powerful: a survivor, an advocate, and most importantly, a mother raising her daughter to be fearless in the face of any cage that might try to contain her spirit. The moonlight reflected off the water, and Sophia smiled, knowing that somewhere in the world, another woman was looking at the same moon and gathering the courage to take her first step toward freedom. Her story was over, but the movement she had helped start would continue long after she was gone. A legacy of liberation that no amount of wealth or power could ever contain.